Year 11, we're looking at the structural frame. So previously we have looked at the subjective frame and the cultural frame. This session we're looking at the structural frame. To remember the structural frame, it's one of the easiest ones to remember. Structurally, we're looking at how an artist or an artwork is made. What are the materials? Why did the artist choose those materials? What is the traditions? What are the rules associated to those materials and that art practice? Okay, so from the viewpoint of the structural frame, a student can examine how artworks communicate ideas both to the artist and to the audiences. These ideas can be expressed through the use or the rejection of artistic conventions and by using a visual language of signs and symbols. It's broken up into four elements. It's the artistic conventions, the physical properties, and signs and symbols and visual elements. So artistic conventions may be thought of as established ways of doing things. How do you do things? How do you paint? How do you draw? There is a certain system. It might be at your early stage because you are an art student, but there is a certain way that you set yourself up, or how you paint something, how you draw something. There is a certain system and the reasons why you do that. So examples include the way that classical sculptures approach a block of stone, how an abstract painter handles oil paint, or how an installation artist works within a gallery space. So each medium has its own sets of rules and traditions. Medium is expressive form. Every expressive form has its own sets of rules and traditions, and you need to know these in relation to the expressive form that you have chosen to work on in your body of work. You need to know the set of rules and the traditions, whether you're painting or drawing, why artists choose to do those things. If you don't know these rules and these traditions, it lessens the conceptual strength and meaning in your art practice and your artworks. So when it lessens the conceptual meaning and the strength, that means that it's going to take away certain marks from you. So we need to know the set of rules and traditions in relation to the expressive form that we've chosen. So artists can also choose to go against established practices in a way that the Dada artists did in earlier 20th century and create your own art making practices. So you can change and make your own set of rules and traditions, but you can't do that unless you know what was previously before you. You can't sit in the classroom before your artwork and say, oh, I just do it because this is how I do it. That is a superficial answer, and it's not accepted in senior arts. You need to know why you're breaking rules and breaking traditions, and you need to have a valid answer and be able to talk about why you have broken those rules and those traditions. You cannot say to your art teacher, I do this because that's just how I've done it. You need to establish yourself with your critical and your historical studies to support yourself. You cannot, in visual arts year 11 and 12, I just paint it because this is how I feel. Subjectively, when we're looking through the subjective frame, yes, but when we're looking through the structural frame, and that's how we mark your work, that's how we go into depth with your work, is that we're not just focusing on one particular frame, we have actually analyze it from the four frames. So you need to be actively researching your expressive form. You need to know why you are doing these things, whether you are drawing that particular, why are you adding that color? Why are you adding that line? Why are you using that paint? Why are you using that paintbrush? You need to know these things. Now, everyone in class has chosen their own body of work. So that means that your individual study is that you need to access that information and research those ideas to support your artwork. It's very important, and I cannot stress that enough. Okay, so by understanding the significance of artistic conventions, artists can apply knowledge, skills, and values to their own art making practice. Okay, so the physical properties. The structural frame also focuses on the physical nature of art making and asks us to think about what the artwork is made of, how big it is, how it was put together. So consider how different materials can express different ideas. And we look at the example of boy, which is this image down here. Okay, on first viewing of that, you say, okay, it looks really realistic. It's a boy crouching down, but the significance of boy is the physical properties of the size and the scale. It's a 5 meter sculpture. It is an Australian artist, okay, Ron Muick, and it's the careful handling of materials has created a realistic image, and the imposing size are the key expressive elements of this work. That pose, when you look at that image of that boy as he's huddled down, there's a sense of vulnerability in that pose. Okay, why would that boy be? It's like he's crouching and he's hiding. That's in stark contrast to the size. So when you're actually in front of that artwork, you have this sense of emotion where it can be quite conflicting because you're looking at the vulnerability of boy. His chest is exposed, he's in his underwear, so there's an overall sense of vulnerability in this sculpture, but the size changes that conceptual meaning because it's actually quite big. 5 meters, you can see how big it is by these figures here. Okay, so that is the emotion that you would get when you're in front of this artwork. But when we're viewing art, we must always remember that we are viewing art generally from a computer or a textbook, and we need to remember to evaluate, analyze that artwork as if we were in front of it, standing in front of it. Okay, because our viewing experience as a 2D form versus a 3D form can be very different. You need to remember this because when we go to our exams are all 2D images. You get a plate booklet, that's what it's actually called. It's a plate booklet, and in that is numerous amounts of images that are 2D. But just because we're viewing it in 2D does not mean that the artwork itself is 2D. It could be sculptural, it could be a time installation, it could be a sculpture, which is 3D. But the way that we view it most of the time, 95% of the time, is from this 2D form. So we need to make sure that as a viewer, as an audience, that we are conscious of that and how we need to ensure that we are retaining the correct visual language and not just gazing through, because and we all do that, we're all time poor, but when we're actually viewing an artwork, we take the time, and that's why we learn about these frames, because we can use these frames when we are viewing work in this format, as well as how to reply or answer questions in our HSC, and it's also a framework for our critical historical studies. Okay, so signs and symbols. Using the structural frame, you can think about how art uses visual language, and that's a term you've been introduced. I will always say visual language. It's a language that can be thought of as systems of signs and symbols. The study of signs and symbols is known as semiotics. In semiotics, an image is called a signifier, and the concept attached to the image is the signified. Pretty basic stuff. So you have the image signifier. The concept, the idea attached to that, okay, is the signified. So there's two elements of it. Together, they create a sign. Okay, an artist can use the rich visual language of signs to convey meaning. For example, if in your artwork you use the image of a heart, which is shown on the opposite page here, okay, on the left, what would it say? So the first one, it's really simple. It's a red. It looks very juvenile. It looks like it's either painted, crayon, pencil. There's nothing magic about this except for when we're analyzing it through signs and symbols, what's the first thing that we think of when we see a red heart that's drawn like this? Love. Love is the first thing. It's symbolized with the red. Yeah, it's symbolized by the shape. Okay. If instead we represented the heart in a different way, so the second one here, such as the one on the right, would the meaning be the same? It could, but it doesn't. In this example, it doesn't. This one's love, it's juvenile, it's naive, it's quite simple. Whereas this one, there is no color, it's only line, it's not simple. This looks that it could come from a scientific image. Here, most people will mostly look at this and say, well, it's depicting a human heart. But there's nothing to indicate that that is conveying a human heart. If you have seen this image before, I'm going to bring it into the frame here. If I can. No, I can't. There is a picture. Here we go. Okay, so looking at this image here, this here is an image of a heart, okay? What type of heart is it? Well, it looks very similar to the drawing, except for it's actually a realistic heart. Is it a human heart? Well, we don't know this because there's no citation to this. So, but it looks like a heart. This image here is actually a blue whale heart. So this indicates, and you can see that our assumptions or the ideas that are conveyed by this is that, oh, that's just a human heart. But the chances are that it could possibly be another animal heart. So when we're looking at art, we need to make sure that we're reading the artist's statement, the artist's citation, so that we understand the visual language that the artist is trying to convey. Because we can, just by quickly looking at an image, okay, just by quickly looking at the image, we can make the wrong assumptions, okay? It's very important. Okay, so visual elements. Even the simple idea of drawing a line across a page opens up the creative choices for an artist. The artist needs to consider what quality of line would best express their idea. It may be smooth, jagged, curvy line. By exploring the aesthetic properties of visual elements, this is your elements of art. If you don't know them, I suggest you go back and you learn them, elements of art. Okay, such as line, color, shape, texture, lighting, and three-dimensional space. An artist develops an understanding of how they can best be used to communicate their ideas. Okay, so we look at another student's example. Okay, this student has used a digital rayograph. It's pictured below here, okay? A student has created a composition, okay? Composition is collective. How you place things in your artwork is a composition. There's composition rules and traditions as well. You need to dig deeper, okay? Why did you place that image in the center? Why is it to the left? There's all these things that you need to analyze your own work, okay? So by experimenting with different combinations of objects and the relationship between them, the student was able to organize the individual elements into a harmonious, well-balanced whole. With a time-based work such as film, you, the student, can use the structural frame to consider how long the edits should be. Fast cutting between shots, generating a feeling of energy, while long-held shots convey a reflective or peaceful mood. Choices that the artist makes contribute to the success of the finished artwork. Film is really great as an expressive form. Those students that are exploring photography and documented forms, it's always really nice to experiment with film using your photographs that you have in your collection of your body of work, extending it and exploring the film element, going from a static still image to something that moves, can really broaden but also really strengthen the conceptual meaning and strength to your work. So you can see in that example, okay, Usually when we're looking at our majors, we start at the foundations, and then we're experimenting, and we're trying new things, and we're elevating, because the goal is to elevate it to become a sophisticated, refined artwork. Okay. So year 11, we're experimenting with expressive forms. We're looking at why do we choose these things? Why do we choose this material? Another example is you were introduced to air ink. Why did the artist choose the air ink over just normal black paint? Why couldn't the artist just use normal black paint? Why is it a different meaning? How does that change just by that change of material, of black paint versus air ink? How does that change? Well, it changes because the air ink is a totally different product. It's a byproduct of pollution. And so by using it, there is a message conveyed in that work that, hey, um, I'm concerned about Mother Earth. I'm concerned about our consumption. I'm concerned that we're not doing enough. Okay, and it's bringing a message, not just the artwork, oh yeah, that's pretty, but there's an underlining concept beneath it. Okay, look at what's happening, look deeper, not in just the artwork, but in Mother Earth. It's just funny today, though, when you probably go through this, it won't be Earth Day, but today is Earth Day. So maybe that's why I'm paying homage to Earth Day and that focus. Perhaps that someone in class hasn't really settled on a theme. Maybe Earth Day, or maybe why is it just one day that we celebrate the Earth? I mean, we're on Earth every single day. I get really conflicted. Yeah, let's celebrate Earth for one day. Why are we not celebrating it every day is beyond me. Okay, enough of that. So your task is student task 5.3. So think about an artwork that you're still developing. So we're still looking at your body of work. What are you exploring this term? What are you going to push? What do you want to do? Okay, and answer the following questions in relation to it. 1, could I use the conventions of a particular art style? This one's really good. What it does is it uncovers whether you've actually done the research attached to your expressive form. Okay, because you're like, well, what art style is it? Well, it's not going to be the same as the person next to you, and this uncovers whether you're doing enough. Okay, if it's painting, drawing, photo, what is the art style? Because they've chosen an expressive form, it's attached to an art style. Find it. It is very rare to come up with an idea that hasn't already been done. Okay, even I myself, as an artist, I have not done any work, or the art practice has already been done before me. It is very rare, and art is a way of appropriating the past to create our own. We're allowed to do that. We can't copy and paste. We're allowed to appropriate, and we'll explore that later on in our studies. Okay, number 2, what materials are best suited to my idea, and why is that so? So, okay, example, let's say we've got someone in class that's making a sculpture. Okay, you're making the sculpture at this stage at cardboard, because we're not in our art studio, we're not in our classroom, we don't have access to clay, so you're experimenting with cardboard. You can actually say, well, this is it. This is what isolation is. This is how isolation has affected my materials. And I've decided we've got a plethora, meaning many, recyclable things in the household. I've decided I'm using these for my body of work until I have access to these other, and I want to explore that deeper with wood. I want to explore that more with metal. You can do these things if there is a sculptor in the class. You don't necessarily just have to do clay. You can do any material that you can think of. We can make that happen for you. Okay, what materials are best suited to a painter? Why are you using acrylic over oil? Why are you using watercolor over acrylic? Why are you using Is there another material that's best suited to your idea, or have you chosen that material because of a specific reason? We need to know that. I need to know that. Again, these are not one worded answers, these are quite in depth. You are not allowed to respond in a superficial manner. What techniques do you think you need to explore and master? Okay, what techniques do you need to explore and master? If you're drawing, I struggle with depth in my drawing, so that would be something that I need to explore and master, is the shading and the depth. Movement is really important. Movement depth is very important when we are looking at painting and drawing. Okay, you're looking for that movement, you're looking for that depth. If you don't have depth and you don't have movement, you've got a very static painting or drawing, meaning that it's just there's not, and unless it's part of your convention, part of your conceptual meaning, or if there's something attached to that, if it's a sign or a symbol, or it's significant to your idea, you need to explain that. How can I organize visual elements to convey meaning? So how can you organize visual elements to convey meaning? Okay, an example of this is when I am painting, when I'm painting artworks, my focus is always Bamal, earth. So I'm not going to use non-earth colors, because it's not going to convey the meaning of earth, is it? If it's a fluorescent color, that does not have the meaning. It's not conveying that message that I need. So line, and we go back up to these art elements of line, color, shape, texture, lighting, and three-dimensional space. How can you organize each of those in your body of work to convey your meaning? So this is a way to uncover and broaden not just your knowledge, your conceptual meaning, and your strength. And I say that many, many times over the course of senior visual arts: conceptual meaning, conceptual strength. Without those two, without those two, it's very hard to have a refined, sophisticated artwork. And that's our aim. Our aim is a sophisticated, refined artwork, because we are exhibiting not only to the HSC markers. You have an exhibition, your final exhibition, your Year 12 exhibition. That's the end game, to have a sophisticated, refined artwork worth showing to the public. Okay, so what symbols or signs could I use to add layers of meaning? Okay, with that particular one, you don't just have to write, I'm going, mine's about love. We can go back up here. Mine's all about love, so I'm going to add a love heart. You can draw it as well. Okay, like you can experiment with these signs and these symbols, okay, to add layers of meaning. You need to do these. Okay, you need to do these questions because it helps me help you with your body of work, but also with your major. Okay, so if you're not answering these questions, then I'm going to find it really hard to try and pull out these ideas that are in, and it's really hard to get what's in your mind out on paper, out into and created into a major. But this program works, these questions, and there's a lot of questions. It's ramping up in term 2, and it only ramps up again in term 3. Okay, it's fast paced, but these are designed to help you as a student artist. So let's get these done and we will move on to our final frame. Thanks, guys.